What up, world? This is the GoalNet recording live from outside of Chicago here. Per today's Instagram vote, we are actually going to go over a initial impression slash midterm review. We're a little bit kind of in the middle, but this is the TGN Spec by Optic Gear. So if you want to know the back history and the graphics, the weight on the pads, or the overall specs, please check out my unboxing video. I know everybody's time is precious, so in the spirit of keeping things concise and to the point, I'm going to try and not review anything we've done in another video and just focus on my short-term review for this gear. But if you like the older review format, feel free to throw some comments down below, and on future videos I can look to go back to, that 30 to 40 minute video, but today we're going to try and keep this to about 10 to 15 minutes. So this piece of gear is based off of the stock GNetik 4 pad, but I did modify quite a bit of features. Again, check out the unboxing video for what, and that was based on my experience with the Optic and a lot of other gear that I've been testing over the last 2 years. Probably one of the most fun things about ordering gear from Brian's is that you almost get to play gear designer. It's not fully bespoke in the sense, that you're kind of working off of a stock pad, but it is absolutely, the most customizable solution in the industry. And the great thing is if you have an idea and you ask your retailer, I ordered these through the Goalie crease, they'll work with Brian's to figure out if you can accomplish what you want to accomplish. So to maybe save everybody a lot more time, pads are great. I mean, these really, the Optic was solid, but the more I used them, maybe there were a few items that I nitpicked about. And pretty much every single thing about these pads that I was kind of wishing maybe I'd done differently on my TGN Spec Optic, with the help of the Goalie crease and Brian's, absolutely nailed it on this set of gear. So if we take a look at the gear itself, one of the ideas I had for strapping to try and make the pad as responsive as possible was to actually replace this elastic here with nylon, and I only used those for about 2 skates and ended up abandoning that. And the reason being is that to me this strapping system just screams to be worn tight around the calf, which is great, if you like a responsive pad. So as you can tell, there's almost overlap when it's not on my leg channel there with the wraps. So this is very snug in my leg. But with the elastic, the pad can give just a little bit so that it rotates perfectly square. And the wide open knee, as you know, allows for great rotation. You can wear, pretty much any knee pad you want and no complaints. So the 2 check boxes I have when it comes to strapping, I guess really 3, is does it rotate well? Is it comfortable? And lastly, but somewhat something I personally care about, maybe not every attendee will, is it easy to throw on in the room? And this checks all the boxes for me. I can throw these pads on in second. They're extremely comfortable on the leg. They are extremely responsive and they rotate great. And that is one of the biggest improvements for me with this set of pads over the Optic, is that kind of no matter what position in, once there's a little body weight on this pad, is the thigh rise here seals really, really well. So you can see a little bit of a gap, but again, there's no weight on it. Once there's body weight on it, pretty much every time a puck is at the 5-hole, and you can see people have definitely been trying to snipe there, get really, really good seal. So very, very happy with that. No complaints. The other thing that I changed is there's harder HD foam in the face of this pad than stock, which should make the pads heavier, but between getting rid of the knee landing, they're not heavier. And these pads come in at under 5 pounds, which is crazy light for a 35 plus 1.5 goal pad. And the rebounds are definitely harder on this set of pads than my previous Optics. And that is again because of the harder face. So if this pad were opened up on the front of this, running the whole length of the pad, there'd be some HD foam. And if you're not that familiar with foam specs, the harder the foam is inside the pad, the stiffer it makes the pad. But in the spirit of pucks launching off, if something's hard, it forces the puck to compress. The puck acts as a spring and shoots off the pad. So I went with harder foams on this pad versus the stock GNetik or even what's in the Optic. Did keep the soft boot though. Love a flexible boot, and you can see that's nice and responsive but flexible. One of the other features that was really new for me on this pad is that Brian's went away from their flat elastic smart strap on the toe and went with a rounded bungee style lace. And kind of unique in the design for me is that they have this leather spacer here, and that's designed to simulate toe tie slack. So I've been using Pro laces since I started doing TGN, and to me those are the benchmark between their customer service and the quality of the product. I'd recommend those to anybody. If you're buying these stock with them, I don't think anybody needs to rush out and buy Pro laces or any of the other solutions in the market. These work really great. I'm actually probably going to change to the Pro laces just because at this point in time, made friends with Michelle over there, and I just, I think they're a great product, and I do prefer the skate lace over the exposed bungee, but we're really splitting hairs at that point in time. For pretty much anybody buying these pads, you're going to be fine with the bungee toe ties. And if you look at it this way, Brian's is saving the average goalie like 50 bucks by including these on the pads, and it's also reducing like the nuances or annoyances of doing a mod right after you buy fresh gear. So this is definitely a great feature added by Brian's. So another thing to consider with these pads versus my other pads is that these have a hard knee block in them, and you can just hear when I hit that. The reason I did that is exactly for that. When these hit the ice, it's almost like a security blanket. You hear that nice kind of thud, you've got that good seal. You're not gonna get any squeakers. And it's also a bit more efficient, I'd say, with energy transfer as well. So huge fan of the hard knee blocks. So the only downside to going with the hard knee blocks is that depending on what knee pads you wear, if your knee pads don't have a very forgiving knee landing, you can get some pain. It's not like a problem per se, it's just understanding the trade-off. So the benefits of the hard knee block are great seal, great responsiveness. Acoustically, just again makes a nice kind of comforting pounding sound when it hits the ice. The trade-off is, like the stock Brian's Pro 2 knee pads work great. Those are very cushiony. I've used a couple different models I've been testing on Instagram, the 1X, the 1S, where they have firmer knee landings, and it's just not as comfortable. So it's definitely one thing to keep in mind that, there's really a kind of a symphony that needs to go between the pad and the knee pad working together. So if you do get hard knee blocks in your pad, just something to consider that you need to make sure you have some soft, cushy knees. And for me, I wear knee pads specifically for the landing. Per some of the studies CCM has done, you put twice the amount of your body weight on your knees when you land. So about 200 pounds, that's 400 pounds. I'm 6'2", so I'm a pretty big guy. So that's a lot of force and a lot of pressure on my knees. So I wear knee pads to protect my knees from my body weight, not so much pucks. Got a decent thigh rise on here. My butterfly seals well enough, so I'm not really getting a lot of shots that squeak through and hit me in the knee. So if you've seen any of my Instagram clips or any of my coverage of the Optic, you know that OptiSlide is my favorite sliding technology of any of the sliding surfaces that I've tested, and I've used pretty much all of them. And the reason I like OptiSlide is that it's just consistently fast on all ice, so I don't get a Zamboni when I skate all the time. So, second, third period as the ice degrades. This mix of Primo material here, which you can see has like a wide carbon fiber weave look, and the harder foams inside the landing, really give this a good fast slide. It's definitely going to be an eye-opener if you've never worn these. You might feel like you're sliding out of the crease. And there's definitely times on fresh ice, like it takes me a second to get adjusted still with how fast they are. But again, I personally find it to be the fastest sliding surface on the market. And it's really effortless, like a minimal push still gives you maximum effort. So if that's something you're looking for in a pad, you'll definitely love the OptiSlide. That's available on both the GNetik 4 and the Optic. Yeah, so just trying to think, kind of going over this pad, anything else. So again, hard rebounds on this are great. The thicker HD foam in the face, really amped up the seal that next level. The same with the firmer knee blocks. OptiSlide, for me, is my favorite sliding surface so far. Updated version of the smart strapping is really fantastic. So the only thing I think we didn't cover in this video yet is durability. And again, I've got maybe 10 to 12 skates on these, so enough to have an opinion, but definitely not enough for like a hardcore, committed to long-term opinion. The only areas that have wear are typical. If you've seen my P2 review, I noted this every single set of pads I get some sort of wear there. That's because of my stance, the overlap of my thigh rise just a little bit. And this left pad here ends up behind the right. And then unfortunately, no fault to Brian's at all, but somebody stepped to my pad and I got a skate cut there. So that'll be another review where I try and repair that with some shoe goo and try and avoid doing stitches. But if that fails, I'll definitely stitch that up. That's relatively easy, and that can happen to anybody's pad. That's not Brian's fault. So again, in closing, with the help of the goal crease and Brian's rep, I was absolutely and utterly able to dial these pads in based on, my education, I'll say, of goalie equipment since starting the goal net, just in terms of knowing exactly what I like in my specs, not necessarily like what's available in the market, and using two different sets of two different sets of optic before the GNetik, was just really able to take all of that feedback and put this into a pad that works perfectly for my game. I'm just trying to think if there's anything to this point I'd change. And honestly, no. I mean, if I had to do it again, there's not really anything I'd change. I think the only other negative that just came to mind, which is interesting because I've now used, gear with this optic style minimum knee roll for, probably 18 months now, is I never had a single skip over with the optic, which would be a trade-off and why people wouldn't like this thinner outer roll. I've randomly had two with the GNetik with plays and tight, but keep in mind GNetik is stock with the thicker outer roll, so this was my spec to do that, and that's because it makes the graphic blend in better and then allows me to get tighter post integration on RVH. So I don't think 2 shots in however many ice sessions is any reason to panic, but it is just something to note. But it's also something, if you look at the fact that I've worn these for maybe 18 months between both sets of pads, I had 2 in 18 months. So just something to note. For me, that's not panic button. But again, just trying to share all the highs and lows with these pads. But generally speaking, these are dialed in. I would expect to see these in my bag probably for a long time. May not necessarily buy gear next year if I'm still happy with this. So overall, really happy with the GNetik 4 TGN Spec gear. So head over to thegoalnet.com to ask me any questions or leave them in the comments. This is the GoalNet signing off.